Seis Manos is the grindhouse kung fu cartoon show I never knew I needed in my life. This amazing cartoon that Netflix did not promote at all somehow slipped past my radar, came out in October, just happened to see it last week. So I will watch pretty much anything kung fu, or at least I'll give it a chance. And when I saw a kung fu cartoon, I thought, well, sounds cute. And it's amazing. Episode 1, we have this little boy, Domingo. Poor little Domingo, who's a mango thief and with a heart of gold. He ends up either stumbling on or he knew where it was. Who's to say? This kind of monastery-looking place, but not a Catholic monastery. No. Deep in the heart of Mexico, there is a Chinese monastery where an old man named Chu had gathered 3 orphans: Jesus, Isabella, and Silencio. He takes care of them. He has them grow up. Domingo comes in and they teach him the error of his mango stealing ways. And by the end of the episode, Domingo heads back to the town of San Simon, there to give back mangoes which he had stolen. And by the end of the episode, he's caught up in a gunfight and killed, smashed to death by a statue. Holy crap, was that great! You had me hooked, Seis Manos. This show was created by Brad Graber and Alvaro Rodriguez. I'm not super familiar with either of them, although Brad Graber seems to be a co-owner in an animation studio out of Austin called Powerhouse Animation. Now, it looks like they're doing a lot of stuff with Netflix. They worked on Castlevania, and they're working on something else that's coming up, Gods and Heroes. I don't know much about that. Something else called Heaven's Forest, which is also announced. Now, Castlevania was really a breakout success, and had I known that, I would have maybe watched a little closer to see what they were doing. But the best thing about this show is the love. I don't know if it was Brad or Alvaro who wrote this show, but one of the two of them absolutely loves Kung Fu, and it comes across. So this show is set in the middle of nowhere, Mexico, in a fictional town called San Simon, which is safe and free of the drug cartel violence that plagues the rest of Mexico. I don't know how much drug cartel violence was back in the 70s, but it certainly seems like a concern for Mexicans today. Now, he loved it because in the 3 main characters, Isabella, Jesus, and Silencio, they use different styles of Chinese martial arts in a similar way to the different benders in Avatar. Isabella is mostly Hung Gar, which is quite interesting because it's Hung Gar is a southern style, but it seems when you look at it, it's more like muscly. It's things that you would think of a large man. Whereas Jesus, he uses drunken boxing, is also a guy who likes to drink. And Silencio, he uses more of Bak Mei style. And it has a lot of connections with Chinese historical thinking. Now, they say it's a Taoist place, and every episode in the beginning will have some quote from the Tao Te Ching or something that sounds very interesting, but it doesn't really get that deep into it. One of the things I love is the MacGuffin of this story. So, how did this old Chinese man end up in the middle of nowhere in Mexico in the 70s? Well, he escaped from his monastery, presumably in China. He has what the other person, whose name is Lo, who comes in seeming to be his older brother. Chu is actually escaping Lo, and he has a peach with him. Now, this peach, for anyone who knows Chinese mythology, the story of Journey to the West with Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, he breaks into heaven, basically, and he steals the peaches of mortality, making himself immortal. So, if you know that, you have the idea that this somehow has to do with them being immortal. And this dovetails into the more Mexican side. Now, on the Mexican side, you have this drug cartel boss named El Baldi, and he is bald, played by the fearsome and vegan restaurant owner, Danny Trejo. El Baldi's mother is some kind of a witch, or maybe some kind of a god. It's not 100% clear to me. A lot of this story has worship of Santa Muerte, who would be like the saint of death. It's someone who these cartel figures like to pray to. And kind of sort of in Catholicism, but not exactly. It's kind of confusing. But at any rate, his mother is somehow alive and a witch, and he's cutting off pieces of her flesh and feeding them to people to give them some kind of magical power. Now, pretty much everybody who eats it turns into, I don't know if you'd say a demon or some sort of human mutant, and they have this unquenchable hunger that they go around eating people. It's amazing. Let me just tell you. The best thing about this show is, in true Grindhouse fashion, tons of people die, but the people who die are almost always set up, so you care about them. One thing I don't like a lot about anime is, like, in the first episode, they'll have some kid with his best friend from growing up, and then the best friend will do something stupid and he dies, and I just don't care. This is great. Domingo gets crushed by the statue. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really care about Domingo. But there are others, a lot of others. Lena, Silencio's girlfriend, who had her right hand cut off by Baldi when she was a kid. Not a great ending. You had Padre Serrano. Now, this is the part I didn't like. Padre Serrano was a town priest who was also a cartel chief, and he used this position to make kind of a paradise in San Simon while he was making the money. But you have Jaimito. Jaimito is awesome. Jaimito is this drunk who's in a bar, and Jesus has him do like some Chinese stuff. And later on, Jaimito taken in jail, of course, as the town drunk would be, in order to sober up. And he's got to fight these mutant werewolf type things from dogs that were made by eating the flesh of El Baldi's mother. It was incredible. Now, Netflix lists a Mexican company as co-producing it. So originally I thought this was actually a Mexican cartoon, much like Netflix has deals with TV production companies in other countries. But apparently this actually is American. I'm assuming Alvaro has some Mexican ancestry. And it comes through in a couple of characters. We have Garcia, who is some kind of a federale who lives in San Simon. She's just seen sweeping up the streets and stopping kids from stealing stuff. and she wishes something would happen. Then you have Brister, who's a black American. He was a Vietnam veteran, and he later worked for the DEA. Now, even the writing on this is great. So it's a pretty common trope that the black guy would be a real wiseacre. And his boss comes in and tells him, where you been? You gotta do this, that. And Brister says, I was effing your wife. And then his boss comes back. Yeah, well, tell her to be home when my clothes need cleaning. So he goes back in his apartment, and there's a lady in the bed. And she's like, who is that? He's like, your husband. So it seems like ha ha ha. But then later in the series, it actually is his boss's wife. And the whole time he's like, I don't know why my boss hates me. Like, yes, buddy. I wonder why. Great writing. Great kung fu knowledge. Now, some of the time the animation style falters a little bit. If you're a fan of 90s cartoons, this probably appeal to you, especially Aeon Flux. This animation seems to have been done by, like most things, a Korean company. And there's some places where it's a little choppy, it's not that smooth. They do a weird thing with cars. Most of the show is 2D animated, but then the cars are very clearly 3D models that have like grunge textures on there. Totally does not match with the rest of the story. Very, very strange. But the kung fu parts are generally pretty decent. I don't know who did the original storyboards, who did the original keyframes, if that was all done in Korea, or if they had if Powerhouse did it in the U.S. and then shipped it over to Korea for the tweens. But the way that they fight using their different styles of kung fu are pretty accurate to how they would be, and seem very much in place if you liked 70s and 80s Hong Kong kung fu films. Alright, so Joe dies, the three kids, they don't know what to do, and they get sucked into this cartel battle with El Baldi. Now, El Baldi is the one who cut out Silencio's tongue, so he can't speak, which is why he's called Silencio. Then the whole series is about them trying to defeat him and to save San Simon. But you have this other story which comes to the forefront at the end, which is Lo. He comes looking for that peach because he's old and decrepit and dying. He gets the peach, eats the peach, and he's now still a white-haired guy, but much like the 8 immortals of Taoist legend, he's spry, he has many magical powers, and he wants Silencio to be a new assassin. So he ends up taking Silencio over to what we assume to be China for quote-unquote training. Bam! That's where we end up. You have Isabella and Jesus. They have to find their way over to China and save their brother. So to wrap up, Seis Manos. Oh my god, 8 half-hour episodes. This is incredible. If you like Grindhouse, if you like Kung Fu, this is for you. Very little sexual content, but there is a lot of violence. So, young kids, I don't know. Teenagers, yeah, probably. So what do you guys think? Are you watching Seis Manos? What style of Kung Fu would you like them to add? How is it going to be with 2 or 3 Mexicans living in China the next season? Let me know. Subscribe to the channel so you can find out. If you like this video, click thumbs up. If you didn't like it, still click thumbs up. And leave a comment down below.